Hello and welcome to a new episode of New Earth Awakening. Today we welcome to the show Phyllis Leavitt. Phyllis is a retired psychotherapist with a master's in psychology and counseling who spent over 30 years working with children, families, and adults around abuse, trauma, and healing. She is the author of several spiritually informed books, including A Light in the Darkness, Into the Fire, and her latest, America in Therapy, a new approach to hope and healing for a nation in crisis, where she bridges psychological and spiritual wisdom to support both personal and collective healing. Phyllis, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here. I'm excited to talk with you.
Thank you very much, Phyllis. So let's just begin by you telling a little bit about your story and how this journey has led you to the work and service you're doing today.
Yeah. Well, I think my story is probably not all that uncommon. Although, when you're having your story as a child and growing up, you think you're alone. You think you're the only one having that story, right? Because I grew up in a time and in a family and sort of in a culture where no one talked about spirituality at all. That wasn't even a word. And no one talked about psychology or mental health. That's just really, none of that was on the radar. So as a little girl, I had some significant abuse that I buried and did not remember. So I just always felt like there was something wrong with me. So I had this sort of wound from the very beginning, and I was always trying to figure myself out and heal, even though I didn't even have those words. So I had out of body experiences when I was very young that were extremely pleasurable. I would float up on the ceiling in my room at night, and I just wanted to stay there. Of course, I didn't even have the word out of body. I didn't know what that was. And then later, I had very significant, I would just say, spiritually opening experiences that happened for the most part for me in nature, where all of a sudden it would just feel like a veil got lifted and I was part of something divine and unbelievably loving and inclusive in a way that I didn't even have a sense of a personal self. So I had an awareness of having the experience, but the experience was like being one with this beautiful vibrating earth. And so it's very hard to explain those experiences, but if you've had anything like that, they just stand out as so different from ordinary life. But I never talked about any of it. There was no language for any of that. And the other thing that I had growing up was I wrote a poem when I was 13. And for whatever reason, I had this intense connection to my inner self when I wrote that poem. And I think that was my spirit's way of saying writing is your path. And I took that as my path to connection with myself on a very, very deep level. So I would write poems and try to have that experience. Most of the time I didn't, but sometimes I did. And then long story short, I was kind of a child of the 60s. So I was in high school when the whole hippie thing began to evolve, and especially when I went to college. And I got very involved in spiritual groups and meditative practices. And the long story short of that is that doing that inner work from a meditative spiritual level brought me to a place where I understood that I needed emotional healing from what had happened to me. So from the very beginning, these two threads were operating sort of parallel or combined. So I had this major insight one day that I was looking for God's love, but what I really wanted was the love with other people. And I didn't know how to achieve that because I was very, kind of shut down from what had happened to me. So, long story short, I went to therapy. I began to have memories. I began to heal on that level. And in the process of that, I began to hear divine guidance, telling me what my soul was doing in these, which seemed to be like tragic experiences or um, traumatic experiences. There was a soul meaning and purpose to everything that I came here to experience and transform. And so I did that. I have done that guidance over many, many years. The first two books I wrote, A Light in the Darkness and Into the Fire, are all about the original messages that I got that applied to me, but applied to all of us. So um, they were really universal messages. And those experiences, as I was sharing with you earlier, the experience of receiving divine guidance was a whole other vibrational experience than anything I could think of or create on my own. And so it stood out as it was just irrefutable because everything that I heard landed as deep truth. And and one of the things I want to add to that, which was so different from our ego consciousness, is there was never any judgment. It was always deeply loving and understanding and profound, but without judgment. There was no like you're a sinner and you have to heal from your sin. Nothing ever like that. So that's my intro, and I'll let you jump in.
Well, that was quite an intro. I don't know even where to start now. But yeah, let's just jump right into inner child healing. Because at some stage it becomes the fun part. It's like, well, there are these parts of me and they all have needs. They are all trying to elevate me, though some of them don't truly do that. So this doesn't serve anymore. So let's talk about how this inner child healing leads at some stage to divine guidance, as you call it.
Yeah. Well, I would say that my inner child self, and people have different experiences of what that inner child is like. But if you're talking about the inner child that's kind of left over from trauma, you're talking about a part that has for me, had a lot of pain, a lot of tears, a lot of fears, and was just coping the best that she could by mostly trying to hide. And I had, when I was young and when I began therapy, I had a lot of shame about that inner child part of me. I did not want her. I did not like her. I was trying to pretend to the world and to myself that I didn't have that much pain, that I didn't have that much fear, and that I didn't have that kind of access to my real inner self and potential that I wanted to have. So I didn't like that part of myself. And one of the things that I got out of going to therapy was I learned to love her. I learned to honor the journey that she made and survived the things that had hurt her early on. And that was a huge transformation. And I think without making that part of the psychological part of the journey, it would have been much harder for me to keep accessing the spiritual downloads that were coming to me. And I'll share this with you and your audience because I think it was really life changing for me. One of the original messages that I got from divine guidance was that that inner child was actually the doorway to my soul, that I needed to embrace her. I needed to hear her story. I needed to believe her. I needed to love her. And I needed to honor her survival abilities that got me to where I was. And knowing that she was the doorway to my soul really brought those two worlds together. And then guidance began to tell me a lot about past lives in which I had very similar experiences in different ways, a lot of trauma in past lives, that I had come here to heal the whole thing. the whole thing, the whole history, not just this inner child, but everything that I had incarnated and carried. Some of which was powerful and great, and some of it which was really painful and traumatic, which is kind of like what we are, right? We're all of it.
Yeah, well, there is, there is a lot again in what you just said. So,
No.
yeah, so right now at this time in the evolution of humanity, we have access to a lot more healing than ever before. So I totally get it when you say I chose to be here right now to heal a whole bunch of stuff, also from past lives. And a lot of the viewers will also have the same thing, going on with them. But let's focus for now with how this inner child, this wounded little cutie, came to be wounded in the first place. So let's talk about how our current incarnation and the families we incarnated into play a pivotal role into helping us elevate our health frequency from a not so very kind of way.
Right. Well, interestingly enough, and I don't know how many people share this exact experience, but um, the wounding that I had in childhood was sexual abuse, and which is a very profound kind of abuse, and I think it really takes us out in a lot of ways, and it calls us to heal in a very big way if we want to recover our essence and our connection to our highest being, because because you want to defend against hurt, you know, and so our defenses they're understandable from a psychological point of view, but they're not. In the end, they need to be reworked to open the door to um, recovery on all levels, however you might say it. Um, so for me, that was the beginning, and I also think it heightened my sensitivity, because when you're hurt by other people, your antenna get really big about what's safe and what's not in the world. And I also think that those antennae can reach beyond the astral plane to higher levels of consciousness. And that's what happened for me. And I didn't know that that's what was happening. I think my soul chose that before I came into this body. And I only understood it later. So I think the inner child part of us that really it's you could say I have an inner child, you have an inner child, but collectively we also have these unhealed, wounded parts of ourselves. So what I was told about a previous past life by my inner guidance in in a lot of detail, and what I was shown was that many of the people in my life today were players in that life that played different roles. And so what I came to understand is that we have these groupings of souls that we travel with that bring us experience. And so my mother was actually the person who ordered my death in a past life. And my first husband played a different role, and my children played a different role. And what I began to see is that it's not in the end about judgment about whether those roles are good or bad. It's about learning from the experiences that we have. What did my soul come to learn? And that's a really big difference between what we learn in an ego consciousness, which is all about judgment. It's all about who's right and who's wrong and who's good and who's evil. Um, and what do you have to do to get into heaven, or hell? And none of that was part of anything that I learned. It was all these people came into your life to play these roles. And I'll tell you an interesting thing. My mother was very, very old when I wrote my first book, and she read it, and I was afraid for her to read it, right? because in the book I said that she was the one who had killed me in a previous life, and my mother, who had no spiritual orientation whatsoever or psychological orientation whatsoever, read the book, and what she said to me was, which I thought was profound for her. She said, well, I may have killed you in a past life, but I gave birth to you in this one. And that was really profound because she reclaimed something herself from having read the book. So anyway, the whole point is that we play these parts for each other. And the idea is to understand what we're learning from the experiences, not who's right and who's wrong. And that changed my whole orientation to the relationships that I have in this life. And let me tell you, that's a learning I still have to learn because I still go to good and bad and right and wrong like any ordinary human being. And I have to reorient myself over and over and over again. And thank God I have that as a rudder to go through these turbulent waters that we all live in our own personal lives and in the world today.
Thank you very much. It's like you have spoken about a lot of stuff there again, starting with the illusions that we agreed to before we incarnated,
Right,
right? Which is
right,
basically the
right,
illusion of separation, the illusion of duality, this
right,
right and wrong kind
right,
of stuff, right? So I totally understand when you say that it's like kind of a thing, to make in your daily life that you need to integrate that wisdom when you encounter some situation in your life. But basically, yeah,
right.
that's what the game is about, isn't it? Not to go
That's
into
the
the
whole game.
ego
That's the
consciousness.
game.
That's the
That's the
game.
game. Because the game is transforming that ego energy into our illuminated selves, our illuminated souls, or essence, or oneness, or whatever a person calls it. And that's what I've learned. Um, and, without that learning, I think life would just be really painful and challenging.
Exactly. I tend to say there is pain and there is suffering. Pain happens,
Hmm.
you cut your finger or some situation arises and you feel hurt for some reason, whatever it may be. And then there is buying into that story, holding onto it, not letting it go. And that's where suffering starts.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to say, as someone who's made, my journey was painful, like many people's. And what I want to say about that is that it's normal to feel pain, and we can help each other. I think we're here to help each other, not just suffer, but to actually help each other transform that pain and know that it's possible, because a lot of people don't grow up even with that understanding, and they do just suffer. And it's not because they're less than, it's because they didn't get a chance to have exposure to a different road of how to heal.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. Well, there are people who choose not to heal, which is also valid. No
Right,
diggity. But
right.
yeah, exactly. So let's dive a little bit deeper into ego consciousness and Christ consciousness. How would you
Hmm.
describe the interplay?
Well, that's a huge subject, and there's many people who are more, very expert in this. So I don't want to say that anything that I say is the whole truth. I can share my experience. Um, but I think the fundamental part of ego consciousness is that it is a separation consciousness. I'm separate from you. I'm separate from the earth. I'm separate from my spirit. And it runs on, and you mentioned it, and this is something that I was told a lot about. It runs on duality. Something's always better and something's always worse. Something's higher, something's lower, something's good, something's evil. Um, and one of the big dualities that ego consciousness runs on, and we really see this um, so much in the world today, is the duality of domination and oppression and submission. And as long as we don't see ourselves as equal human beings, as equally incarnated souls with rights and responsibilities, as long as we don't see ourselves as equals, then we give ourselves permission to dominate and suppress other people and take from them. And that's one of the biggest things that people suffer from in their own lives and in the world today. And so it's really important to understand that that's part of ego consciousness. In my learning from what I learned about Christ consciousness, and this was I grew up in a household that practiced the Jewish faith. So I didn't learn anything about Jesus or Christ consciousness growing up. I never really resonated with the religion that I grew up in, so I was just always more interested in spirit. But so what I learned from my guidance about Christ consciousness is that there's this beautiful harmony between our individual existence and something much larger than ourselves. Soul, even my soul is part of a greater soul consciousness. And that when we really make contact with spirit, we experience ourselves not as the center of the universe, which is what ego consciousness does. I'm the center of the universe, and you need to conform to or align with me, or I need to push you out or make you wrong or fix you or whatever ego consciousness does. And the Christ consciousness that I learned about was really all inclusive. And it really pointed the way for us to find our true soul expression in the world as a contribution, not just to me. So sort of in the young hippie world of spirituality that I started out in, it was really about I'm going to go to nirvana or something like that, and and it was still all about me and my spiritual development. But when I really made contact with something much higher than myself and I actually had that experience, I understood that it wasn't about me. It's about us. And one of the beautiful messages that I got in the very beginning was, we all go home together. And whatever I have received spiritually that has helped me heal and find a greater consciousness in myself is intended to be of service to all of us awakening. Um, so we're not separate in that way. And that's just one of the many things, but I'll let you jump in because I can say 100 things.
Thank you very much. That's amazing. We are walking each other home.
That is it. That is it. That is it.
Oh, I love it. Thank you very much. So, sorry, let's speak now about what does healing mean to you? What's your own definition of this word?
Mm. I think that's a hard question to answer because it's so multifaceted. But I would say this, I think it begins with listening to your own truth, whatever that is, whatever it is, whether it's the truth that I had abuse in my childhood and I really need to heal, or the truth that I know there's an essence inside of me that I really want to uncover and have be expressed in the world. Or the truth is, I hurt your feelings and I need to be responsible for that and apologize and make amends. Or the truth is, you hurt me. And what do I want to do about that? Maybe I don't want to do anything. Maybe I want to have a conversation with you. Maybe I want to avoid you. Maybe I want to ask my soul what that hurt was about and what I can learn from it. But it's really following your truth. And I really think we live in a culture that does not teach people that. We learn to listen to somebody that says they're the authority. We have to abide by certain cultural rules. And of course we do, to be safe and to be contributing members of a society. But there's a place where we have an intuitive knowledge about what's going on. I may pick up, not from anything you said or did, not you personally, that you're not a safe person for me. I need to trust that. I had so many experiences where I was younger where I really knew something about someone without their ever saying it. And I didn't trust those things because, well, how do you know? How do you know that that's really what's happening? So a really good example was, and probably this maybe sound like an obvious example, but my first husband was having an affair and I knew it. And there was no specific outward evidence. There was just a vibe that I got, but I didn't want to know. And I didn't want to trust myself. And then finally I did, and it was true. And there were many things like that that happened in my life where I just knew something. So um, I would say follow your truth and keep following your truth. that would be the beginning of healing for me. And I had to do that when I went to therapy. You know, my body spoke to me about the violation that it had endured. It was not in my mind. It was in my body. And I didn't want to feel those feelings. Nobody wants to feel those kinds of painful feelings. But if I hadn't allowed myself to know the truth of them, I could not have healed. So that's the big one. And then I would just say, you know, I'd love to share this because it was a heart opening thing for me. I always knew that writing was my path, and writing was a way for me to connect on a very spiritual level. Um, a friend of mine had told me about a writing process where you just ask a question and you listen to whatever your higher self may answer and you write that down. And that is a way to tune into your own truth that anybody can do. And that was profound for me because that became a source of my spiritual guidance.
Thank you very much, Phyllis. This is what some people may call automatic writing, the automatic writing
Uh-huh.
experience, kind of. Yeah. So thanks very much for sharing that with the audience because I think that's a very amazing tool for me as well. You know, ask a question and drop in to the heart center and
Yes.
see whatever flows out, right? I think this is the best kind of self-reflection. Um, you know, or sitting on it. I say I'll go sit on it. Then it usually involves meditation. And if something arises, well, then it's also writing as well. So thanks for sharing this amazing tool with the audience. And do you have another tool that you say this was amazing for me when I was healing my trauma that you can share as well?
Well, yeah. And probably I would have to give you more than I can give you today about this. But one of the things that I was told early on was that we all come into human form with an intention. Our soul has an intention for incarnating, and that intention is the same for all human beings. And it is to find a way to manifest divine love while we're in body through our form and our self expression. And that we all are up against challenges to do that. And the intention resides in our heart chakra. Some of the challenges reside in our other chakras. And then so what I was told is we have a chakra of intention, a chakra of force, which is where you have some of your great energies and some of the energies that seek to block you or seem like they're impasses in your life. And you have a chakra of manifestation. And that's how your soul wants to manifest divine love in the world. So for me, it was the throat chakra that was my manifestation chakra. And I was told all these things because I was supposed to communicate. And that was it. And connection and communication in the throat chakra. The first chakra was my chakra of force, which was where I met a lot of destructive energies that my soul came here to transform into creative energies. So in a nutshell, what I was told is we all have this, it's called a soul triangle. The heart chakra is our chakra of intent, and then everybody has different chakras for their chakra of force and their chakra of manifestation. And that is the key to our individuality and our unique contribution to the whole. And so I began working with those chakras. I began to look at where are the places where I'm stuck? What are the negative energies that have come to me from other people, from circumstances, and from me that I am being asked to transform into my creative energy that moves then up into my throat. And of course, we're all working with all the chakras. So I was given a lot of detail about the chakras, all the chakras, and I'd be happy to share some of that with you. Um, and then what those chakras look like, what the energies of the chakras look like when we're in an ego state of consciousness, when we're receiving and transmitting ego energies, dualities, judgments, all that kind of thing. And then what those energies look like coming through our chakras when we're really channeling or illuminating our soul through our being. And that gave me a pathway that I did not get from psychology. The psychological healing I did was absolutely important, but this was a whole other layer of actually connecting to my soul's intent for my life and how to manifest it in the world. I've just barely started writing a third book about the spiritual guidance that I got. The first two books are about my guidance. The third book is more about psychology in the present world. I'm in the process of writing another book that's all about the chakras and how to work with them and how they apply not only to us as individuals, but to us as a human race and to us as a planet. Because one of the things I was told is that the earth has chakras as well. So it's huge. It's huge.
I love that so much. So, what can you tell us about the chakras of the earth?
Yeah. So basically, what I was told is that they have certain locations. And I was told this way back in the 90s. Um, the first chakra, they said, is under the ocean. And the first chakra is destruction, creation, birth, death, and rebirth. And then there was this magnificent energy that they ascribed to the first chakra that I've never heard anywhere else. And they called it the energy of burying and unearthing. So in our ego state, we bury, and in our soul state, we unearth all the wisdom that we need access to. We unearth the memories that we need to have to heal. And that's all first chakra energy. And that's located somewhere under the ocean. They did not tell me where. The second chakra, which is the navel chakra, they said is in the center of the earth. And that is where the soul seed for the earth and everything on it was implanted in the very center of the earth. And the second chakra is all about the coming together of the male and female, the active and the receptive energies, and that in its most illuminated state, we are both receiving and transmitting divine energy through our being. And they've emphasized that the healing of the masculine energy divide within the human race and within each of us as individuals is the key, actually, to our ascension. Because without that, we're still in a place of domination and submission and inequality. And of course, the physical union of the masculine and feminine is what creates new life. So the soul seed of the earth is in the center of the earth, and the soul seed of ourselves is, well, I don't know if it's soul seed, but that masculine feminine union on an energetic, not just men and women, but on an energetic level is one of the big keys to our being able to evolve our consciousness. And I think that's probably why you see, stories of masters in ancient cultures meditating on their navel, because that's such a pivotal chakra. But they're all important. My guidance did not make a distinction like one chakra was more important than another. They're all equally important and they work together. What they said about the solar plexus chakra, what they said is that changes location during history. It's sort of where the struggles and the way we're supposed to try to manifest are happening on Earth. And so what they said is that the solar plexus is the chakra of will. It's either ego's will or soul's will and God's will coming through us and manifesting in some form. And for the earth, they said that the solar plexus chakra was also in the Middle East at this time. It's not always been there and it will not always be there, but that's where it is now. And it's interesting, all that's happening, and has happened in my lifetime in the Middle East, even though there's things happening all over the world. The heart chakra is in the area of Qumran. The throat chakra, they said, was in the Grand Canyon, which was very interesting. Um, and I had read somewhere that there were some very ancient scrolls that were found in the Grand Canyon. So I don't know anything more about that. But and the throat chakra, they said, is the chakra of connection, interconnection, everything being interconnected, communication, and nurturance. So those are all really big issues for me. And let me share this before I go to the last two, that so they told me that my soul triangle was the heart, the first chakra, and the throat. When I was a child, every time I got sick, I had a sore throat. So sometimes you can see where you've had vulnerability in your body may be the location of one of the chakras that you're working with. Um, I did not have a voice when I was young. I had to learn to have my voice. And understanding about my soul triangle really helped me focus on having my voice, feeling my interconnection, and nurturing myself as well as other people. Um, and I also had an undiagnosed pain in my first chakra for many, many years. And no, it never got diagnosed. And it finally went away. And part of it was through the healing I did with, so I learned meditations with the soul triangle and with the chakras. And we can talk about that later, or another time. The third eye chakra is the chakra of intelligence and wisdom and vision and inventiveness. And ultimately, on a soul level, it's the chakra through which we connect to the map and the plan for humanity and the earth. It's like divine wisdom comes through the third eye chakra. And the crown chakra, they said was in Tibet, and that's our connection to spirit and soul, and that's where soul leaves the body and it enters the body. But I think soul maybe enters the body in different ways. I'm not sure if that's the whole truth. But what they were saying about the crown chakra is that when people are you know, how can I say this? When they're really in the darkness, there's a lot of dark energy around their crown chakra that is keeping them from their connection to source and the light. And that can get cleared with chakra work and meditations, and that the earth has a soul triangle. And this is part of why I'm writing my third book, because what they said the soul triangle of the earth is, and humanity as a whole, is the heart, the first chakra, and the crown. So it's the connection of all of these chakras together. And I'm not doing a good job explaining this right now because it's complex. But we're all operating within a fabric where the goal for humanity is to manifest divine love through our human form and unearth what's buried in our first chakra, move all the destructive energies into the creative, and eventually connect to spirit and soul. And we all have a part within that with our individual soul triangles. Am I making any sense? I know it's a
To me,
lot.
yes. So, yeah, thanks for that. But let's dive a little bit into the healing meditation that you were referencing
Yeah,
to. I think that's
yeah,
very important for people also to listen to.
yes. And I'd love to share this because I have been doing this meditation for many, many years now, and it really has been life-changing for me. So the basic meditation, and then I've learned many, many variations on that meditation, but the basic meditation they called it the breath of the cross meditation, um, or the breath of surrender, you might say. But basically what it is, oh, and just to say this, if I can't show this in your picture, but if my arms are out sideways, that's the horizontal plane, the ego plane that we live on. And the vertical plane is this plane. And we're bringing our energy in from the horizontal plane and transforming it to ascend onto the vertical plane. And the heart is the center of the cross. So the breath of the cross meditation is to visualize energy. So there's what they say is that visualize a fire in the base of the spine in the first chakra, and that fire symbolically is burning up ego energy and releasing that energy for use by our soul to light up the rest of our chakras. So the basic meditation is visualizing burning up, ego energy when maybe it's an upset feeling or an interaction that didn't feel good or a struggle that you're having or whatever it is, anything. Just seeing that fire burning up ego energy in the base of the spine, and then bringing that energy up through all the chakras, out the crown. And then I was given a visual of this. So I saw a big, like, star in front of me, and that was the Christ consciousness. So we're giving that energy to the Christ consciousness and then bringing that energy back down into our heart. So that's the fundamental meditation. Burning ego energy at the base of the spine, bringing it up, lighting up all the chakras, bringing it out from the crown, intersecting, you could say, with God, with oneness, with spirit, with Christ consciousness, whatever speaks to you, because Christ consciousness doesn't necessarily speak to everyone, and bringing that divine love back into our heart to light us up with divine energy. And then I'll tell you just one more meditation, but my whole book, next book, is about all the meditations. Is then once you've identified your soul triangle, then you bring that energy up into your heart, and then into your chakra of force, and then into your chakra of manifestation. And then there's lots of other meditations that I've learned, and I'd really be happy to share with you. But that's the basic one. And if you did nothing else but that basic one, that's a lot. But I would also encourage people, tune in. Where do you feel the most energy in your body? Because chances are, like, I would always feel it in my throat. I would always feel it there. So there might be a clue to what your soul triangle is just by where you start to feel the most block or the most contribution and gift that you can make. And sometimes it's both.
Thank you very much. I love that. Yes, it coincides, right? Fits together.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit now before we almost close up. Let's wrap it up a little bit. And let's talk about values, because that's really
Mm,
something that I also received, is that the values are basically the guiding stars, right?
mm-hmm.
So what is your take on the values, and how do living according to your values strengthen your aura and your field?
Yeah, I think that's a really good one, actually. I mean, there's many, and I probably won't remember them all, but the first one that comes to my mind is self-responsibility. We live in a world filled with blame and othering and projecting a lot of negative, judgmental energies out onto other people. And I think all really good, both psychological healing and spiritual work, brings you back to, who am I? Who am I being in this interaction with you? What am I supposed to learn? How can I be a better contribution to you, to us, to the whole? So I think self-responsibility is a big one. And I talk a lot about that even in my book, America in Therapy, because that's part of what's really hurting us and keeping us from the light as a global population, is that we're so hell-bent on blaming other people. And I think part of that is taking back your projections. And the best way to take back your projections is to heal your own wounds, because we project our shadow onto other people based on the things that aren't healed within us. So that's a big one. And I was given information about something called the law of eating. And it's all about how to take back those projections and the value of doing that, both on a spiritual level and on a psychological level. So that's one value. I think another value is we're equals. We are equals. We're equally loved by oneness. We're equally worthy. We all have a part to play here. And some of us took on really difficult parts, both as victims and perpetrators. So, and there's a whole part in that I've been given about these parts that we play in the play. And they talk about that. We all have a part in the play, and we have a part on an ego level that we play, and we have a part on a soul level that we play in what they call the journey of return to oneness, return to source. Um, Another value that I think is really, really important is, and this goes back to what we were saying about the male, female, and the second chakra and domination and submission, is that we learn to share power rather than wield it over each other. And these are big challenges for the human race, big challenges, because we've been taught that you have to have power over others to survive. When I think the new earth that we are evolving into is a power shared, an equality, and an ascending energy rather than spreading out more and more judgment um, on the horizontal plane. And the last one I'll talk about is, because I think this is a really important one, and it has to do with equality and knowing our oneness together, that if we know that each person plays an important part, then I think we have to really rework our whole relationship between competition and cooperation. Um, because we compete each other out of existence, and the idea is to win. And so that's part of a win-lose paradigm. And I think I'll use your word, the new earth, because I love that. I think we're evolving into an earth and an earth climate for human beings, especially where it is about working together, that we are all parts of one whole. And everything we do either contributes to the health and well-being and the ascension of the whole, or it contributes to keeping us in this divided, warring ego consciousness, a win-lose paradigm, and we're moving toward the win-win. So those are some big ones.
Thank you very much. So you already started hinting towards it, but my question is, what is your highest vision of the new earth that we're co-creating right now?
Absolutely. And I feel like I've gotten this directly from source, because if you think about healing, if you're really healing, let's just say from a childhood wound, let's just say your response to being hurt as a child was to become really aggressive and very defensive because you figured out that was how you could survive. Okay. Once you heal that original wound, your coping mechanisms are going to change. You're not going to be identifying with the aggressor. You're going to be bringing more love, more cooperation, more compassion, more of your contribution, whatever it is that your soul came here to do. And that contribution is always in service of love. It's always in service of love and safety and safe belonging and peace, and other people's ability to spiritually evolve. That's the evolution of consciousness is what it's all about. So if I was to heal that, let's just say that was my wound and I was to heal that, then I'm not putting that out into the world anymore. So the people who might have been victims of my aggression, if I hadn't had a chance to heal, they won't be victims of my aggression. So if we're really committed to healing, we're going to interrupt this cycle of violence. We're going to interrupt the cycle of hatred and discrimination and othering and withholding resources from people. We're definitely going to interrupt the cycle of war. And so then where are we? That's actually the beginning, not the end. What I understand is that once we have actually healed, just like when the individual, the more, and I'm not healed, I'm healing, because I think that's the journey we're on. But the more I heal, the more of a loving, constructive participant I can be on a soul level in the world. And the more and more of us that are that way, the more we have interrupted these cycles of duality and othering and all the things that we just talked about. And then we're ready. And this is what I've just been receiving from guidance recently. Then we're ready as a species to participate in the cosmos in a different way that most of us don't even know what that is. but it's almost like I had to do a lot of healing work to be able to write the things that I've written and come to understand and receive the guidance that I've gotten. If more and more of us are doing that, then where is that guidance going to take us? It's going to take us to greater and greater levels of participation in the evolution of consciousness that actually goes beyond this earth itself. That's what I've been told.
I love it. Thank you very much, Phyllis. That's amazing. And I hope everybody listening is also so happy to hear you say these words. You know, the power of the word, we're co creating this exact new earth right here, right now, just by focusing our attention, our love
Right.
into those amazing, nurturing new earth visions of you with your guides and higher self. So, do you have
Yeah.
any? Yes, tell me.
Well, I just remembered where the third eye chakra is on the earth. They said it was in Egypt.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you have any parting messages for the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I have so many parting messages, but one of them is that I think in this world today, which is very a challenging world because ego consciousness is really fighting back the rising of our own Christ consciousness as individuals and as a collective. And that I believe is lawful. That is what we came to transform, not just in ourselves, but on a planetary level. So I think to take heart. This is what we chose. And we wouldn't have chosen it on a soul level if we weren't up to it. And I think that's an important thing to remember that we really came at a very pivotal time in the evolution of the human species, the evolution of the Earth planet, to play our part. And even if our part seems really small and like a grain of sand because nobody knows who you are or what you're doing, and you feel like you only influence 3 people around you on an energetic level, it matters just as much as the person who's influencing 10,000 or 10 million people. And I think that's very hard to hold in our ego consciousness because we're so much about more and less, right? And we think we have to do bigger and better to make a difference. And maybe that's not true. Maybe it's just the energy we carry that makes the difference.
Thank you very much, Phyllis. So, we will be posting all of your links below, including
Great.
a nice, amazing gift that you are giving to the audience. And I will be glad to have you once more. So, thank you very much for being here today and for sharing your light and love with the world.
Well, thank you for having me, and I would be delighted to come back. Thank you so much. You're wonderful.